Hey everybody, this is Mr. Mizell, and we just finished our practice exam. I went through the results and I looked at the questions that received 35% correct answers or less, and I put together a PowerPoint to try to go over some of those main points. So, the beginning of the exam, there was a question looking at freshwater and asking about freshwater supplies around the world. Well, if you look at this diagram, where would you say that the highest quantity of fresh water is? Well, if we take a look around, first thing you could look at would be like lakes. So possibly here, we could say here, there's another one here. Also maybe rivers, so a big river like here, the Amazon, the Mississippi, or like Po River in Italy, looking at freshwater supplies. But also remember that the most amount of fresh water is not just liquid, it's in polar ice caps. So possibly here or big down here. But the question wasn't about freshwater supply and where it is, it asks where it isn't. So where, if you were looking around the world, isn't there fresh water? And just by thinking, where wouldn't there be fresh water? Well, yeah, if you said deserts and desert areas, you'd be right. And one of the answers, the proper answer was here. So here in the Middle East, it's a desert climate, and they don't have a lot of fresh water. So they have to do a process known as desalinization. Desalinization. Which they desalinize, I'm just going to say desalinize water. Yeah, I'll finish it for you. Desalinization. Where they take the salt out of the water for the freshwater supplies. There was also another question asking about the biggest, or 20% of the world's liquid freshwater in the largest lake. Well, looking at the lakes that I circled, which one would you say looks like the biggest? If you said or one of the Great Lakes, like Lake Superior or Lake Michigan, those are the largest lakes in the world. There was another question asking about old growth forests, and if we look at this diagram first up here from 1620 to 1815, 1926, and 1990, what could you tell me about the old growth forest quantity? It's in dark. It's decreased. And if we look at more recent time, where do you still see old growth forests? Yeah, there's some here in Northern California or Oregon, Montana, and then also Arizona. But this really isn't looking at the entire United States. So if we look down here, we once again can see those, but the largest quantity of old growth forests is in Canada, but also, if you get to the top, Alaska. And that was the correct answer. Alaska has the largest quantity of old growth forests. There was another question looking at the water cycle and urban development, and we can compare pre-urban here to urban. Now, when you look at one to another, what is the first thing that catches your eye? Well, what do you notice decreases? Let's look at that to begin with. What decreases if we look at urban to pre-urban? We'll look at evaporation, 25 to 40, so therefore that's decreased. We'll look around a little bit more. What about groundwater, 32 to 50, so that as well decreases. But what about increases? What do you notice increase here with the urban that isn't as high over here? Yeah, look at this, runoff and runoff. So we got 13 and 43%. So you have an increase in runoff because of roads, streets, water drainage, versus only 10% runoff. So those are some things that changes from going before development to development. You have decreased evaporation, decreased groundwater recharge, but you have an increase in surface runoff. There are a few questions looking at the atmosphere. First up, you might have seen this word quite often, anthropogenic. What is anthro? Well, what is anthropology? That's all a class that some of you might take in college. Anthropology is the study of humans. So anthropogenic greenhouse gases are ones that are completely emitted by humans. And with those chemical equations, it's usually the most complex. So if you see this long ClC, remember CFC is chlorofluorocarbons. So if you see chlorine, fluorine, and carbons together, that's what that answer was. Also, there was another question asking about, I'm going to get rid of this here, asking about weather. And if you look down here at this diagram, as we move up in the atmosphere, which layer is first? Yep, we've got troposphere, and then the stratosphere, and then moving up. And those are the two main important ones that we're going to talk about. And weather, if you look, when you think of weather, what do you think of? You think of clouds. So that's why weather occurs in the troposphere. All right? And then there was another question about the most amount of stuff, or molecules. And where would you find the most amount of stuff? Well, for this, you got to think about density. And as you get an increase in density, what tends to happen in the amount of matter in a certain area? Yeah, that increases as well. So if we think about where is the highest density, it's usually at lower levels. So density is the highest down at the bottom, therefore you're going to have increased matter as well. So increased amount of gases, because gas is all of the atmosphere. So weather and matter are both increased in the troposphere. But the stratosphere has the ozone layer, so the beneficial ozone that protects against UV radiation. Blocks it. All right, so it's looking at the atmosphere, troposphere, stratosphere, weather in the troposphere, increased matter in the troposphere. Stratosphere has beneficial ozone, and anthropogenic, human-made. What about non-anthropogenic? Non-human-made. Very good.